October, you would think it's football time, but no. A lot of big-time golf happening all over the planet. The Zozo Championship has been played and won by the man who, if you were writing a movie script, was supposed to win. This week, we're also looking ahead to Bermuda. That's where the PGA Tour is. I might actually get a start in this field, but that kind of makes it cool. And that's one of the reasons why the feel-good story, maybe stories of the year, could come out of Bermuda this week. The USGA has now redefined what it means to be an amateur in the world of golf, and it basically means you're almost professional. Not quite, but frankly, I love the rules. I think that they're very simple to understand, and it's time that the changes were made. So we will dig deep into all of those changes. Also going to be joined by Dan Nathan and Danny Moses later in the show, talk about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and unrealized gains being taxed. Do what? Welcome to Breaking Even. Ned Michaels alongside my man, Barney Alary. Barney, how we doing, bud?
Doing great, Ned. Good to be here.
Surprisingly, we have a lot to talk about, so let's dig in. Let's start with what really is a massive story in the world of golf. The Zozo Championship won by Hideki Matsuyama in his home country of Japan. Last time he played in Japan, Barney, was the Olympics. There were no fans. He nearly missed out on a medal. So this is a little bit of redemption for the Japanese superstar. He hits 82% of his greens, Barney. He just flushed the field, and before the tournament started, he said if his game was a 10 out of 10 at the Masters, he was like a 3 or a 4. And then he won by 5. How good is Hideki Matsuyama? How big is this for the world of golf?
Well, so that's it. So the dream year of 2021 for Hideki Matsuyama goes on. And Hideki Matsuyama is also the one that is going to hit shots more so than most people on the PGA Tour. And he has this look of disgust from about 180 to 210. Like, oh my God, that's the worst shot I could ever hit. and then the camera all of a sudden, the ball lands about 10 feet. And so anyhow, so cry me a river, Hideki, okay? Cry me a river. But in the meantime, the only way that the year could have been any better for Hideki is sure enough that he won Olympic gold. But instead, you know what? I'm sure he is thrilled and delighted about this win. He eagles the last hole. And as you say, wins by 5. Did not even need to eagle the last hole. But in the meantime, what I find extraordinarily impressive is not only that it's a win by 5 over Brendan Steele and Cameron Tringali, but those guys, they finished 4 shots ahead of 4th place. So let's say neither of those two guys play in the tournament and everything shakes out the way it is. Hideki would have won this thing by 9. And so how about that for a little shut your mouth? But in the meantime, also about said Cameron Tringali, did you also know, Ned,
poor guy,
that pushes him as the all-time money earner on the PGA Tour without a tour win? He's made a little over $15 million in his career, said Cameron Tringali.
I said poor guy. Let me say rich poor guy.
Yeah, really.
Cameron's a great dude, obviously a fantastic player. He's taken the mantle now of Brett Quigley, who, remember, had won all these dollars. Now we're FedEx Cup points without winning a tournament. Tringali's going to get one at some point, you think, but he did bogey 17 and 18. But again, it was Matsuyama's made, as you mentioned, an eagle on the 18th. He also eagled earlier in the round. I think it was the 6th, so a couple of eagles. He collects his 7th win, and something that I'd kind of forgotten about. In terms of Asian players winning on the PGA Tour, he's one behind KJ Choi. I used to love watching KJ Choi, right? I mean, he was a former weightlifter. He came out of kind of nowhere, built his own swing. KJ Choi was awesome to watch, and you just forget how good he was. 8 times, and a players champion, too.
Yeah, that's right. But in the meantime, again, with Hideki Matsuyama, a lot of people may or may not realize that this has been a massive year for Japanese golf, and I'm sure that all the fans are absolutely thrilled. But looking back also at something else that took place at the Zozo. Ned, there was a shut your mouth that took place at the Zozo, and the shut your mouth involved a certain Colin Morikawa. That just last week, we were again glossing over that again. He winds up last year winning the proximity of the whole average from 125 to 150, 150, 175, 175 to 200. But Ned, did you know that in the 3rd round at the Zozo, said Colin Morikawa, best ball striker out there, hits a shank? Now,
Yes.
the shut your mouth is not the fact that he hit the shank. The shut your mouth, Ned, is that he goes on and says, it was the first time in my career that I've shanked a shot. Now, wait a minute. Does he mean in his professional career, or does he mean in his life? Because if he's talking in his life, no, 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 no. There's no way. And if that's the case, Colin, I love you. You're amazing, but shut your mouth.
So does that worry you?
Well, no, not at all. But then
seriously, now he knows he can do it. We always talk about the accumulation of scar tissue. That's just pay attention. Just saying. Now he knows that it's in there.
Well, let's just say that it didn't rattle his cage too badly, because he went on to finish 7th. And now, did you also know that he's now ranked number 2 in the world? But did you also know that it was number 2 in the world ranking, that only Tiger Woods and Jordan Spieth have ascended to number 2 ranking at an age younger than 24?
I find him so fascinating. One, he is a super nice guy, very approachable. But Barney, I'm going out on a little bit of a limb here. We may be watching a modern day Ben Hogan, and we don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
He's already won 2 majors. He was the first player, I believe, ever to win 2 majors on debut, winning the PGA at Harding Park and winning this past Open Championship. The world of golf is in a really good state right now, even though Tiger is on the mend. And by the way, did you see Charlie Hoffman? They brought in players, the Zozo Championship, they brought in players into the booth to extended conversations, but also commentary. And Charlie Hoffman was asked about, is Tiger Woods going to make a comeback? And he basically alluded to at some point, yeah, he will. I don't know if he's right or not, but he said he hadn't talked to Tiger about it, but he just thought he would. Anyway, let's move on. Zozo's in the books. Huge win by Matsuyama. This week is Bermuda. We're also supposed to have a World Golf Championship this week, but it has been canceled. The World Golf Championship, HSBC, not being played. So the only event on the PGA Tour this week is the 2021 Butterfield Bermuda Championship. And there are some nice top-heavy names. Patrick Reed is there. Matthew Fitzpatrick, who's been playing really well. Nick Watney, your guy. Your man crush from like 7 years ago. Not have a crush on him anymore. Yeah, my man crush. If you're just joining us here on Breaking Even, Barney and I have been doing this radio podcast thing for just about a decade. And at one point, he had a man crush on Nick Watney. And remember who mine was? Do you remember? Theorborg Olsen.
Oh, that's right.
God, I mean, the guy was so cool. He was such a swinger of the club. And then we're just going to leave it at that. Not crushing on him anymore. And the guy named Mito Pereira, he's also one of the featured players. Young guy that many people probably don't know, coming off the Corn Ferry Battlefield promotion. Awesome player. But Barney, the field, and I was just looking at it here. I've got it right here. The field, I'm pretty sure I'm next in line. It goes deep. Paul Stankowski is getting a start this week. Will McKenzie could get in. These are the list of alternates. Jason Gore said he's not going to play. He's already turned it down. Smiley Kaufman, the same. Heath Slocum said no, thank you. So the cool thing about this tournament, remember who won last year? Brian Gay, right? And he's almost 50. So it secured his playing privileges on the PGA Tour all the way to the PGA Tour champions. So you get this cool mix of kind of guys who were strong in the late 90s, who our generation watched, and then young players who are coming off of the Corn Ferry Tour or sponsor invites this week. So I actually love this field. It's pretty eclectic and diverse in terms of age. You've got a local qualifier that brings in the local flavor of Bermuda. You're not going to have the Rorys of the world playing in this thing, but it's still going to be a fun event.
Well, and another name that no one's going to recognize, but I'm going to tell you is going to be the feel-good story of the year, is Brian Morris, who at the age of 53 was the pro in Bermuda at the Ocean View course. And the tournament itself was taking place at the Port Royal golf course. But anyhow, so Brian Morris at the age of 53 gets a sponsor's exemption. Brian Morris, again, the pro at the Ocean View course. Well, anyhow, about a couple of years ago, he had these vertigo-like symptoms. He goes to the hospital, and in a flash, they discover he's got a sort of a brain tumor. And in a flash, they fly him to Boston. They cut into his skull. They remove the tumor from his brain. But then he goes on, gets stage 4 cancer in his stomach and his esophagus 2 years later. He's also got inoperable tumors in his neck. And good on you, everyone involved at the Butterfield Bermuda Championship, because you recognize this local fella and you're going to give him a chance to live out a dream and get to play in his first ever PGA Tour event. And he says, I used to get nervous, but now that I'm a cancer survivor, at least for now, he goes, this ain't going to make me nervous, but I bet it's going to make him real happy.
Such a bittersweet story, isn't it? I hope he plays well. I hope his emotions, as he said, I hope his emotions are in check, because the fact that he's in the field, even if it's a sponsor's invite, means he's a good golfer. But typically what gets sponsors' invites, Monday qualifiers, is the emotionality of the size of the opportunity that you are presented with to play in a PGA Tour event if you're not a PGA Tour member. So if his emotions are calm and he's pretty cool, Barn, you never know. I mean, making the cut would be a huge accomplishment, but we'll certainly be rooting for him. Another guy to pull for, an old buddy of mine by the name of Jay McClune. You may know Jay's story, Barney. Several years ago, he himself had a heart attack. He died twice on the way to the hospital. Looked like not only was his golf career over, like he was over. But no, he's a fighter. They brought him back. Has a young family, couple of children, and everything was looking pretty good. He actually was starting to play golf again. He was playing pretty well when he played, sprinkled in a few mini tour events and said, you know what, I can do this. He started to do some Monday qualifiers. And remember, last year, he Monday qualified for the Sanderson Farms Championship, which brought light on another event, you could say tragic, but you could also say divine in his life, where he was out working on his farm with a brush hog. And then he ran over some barbed wire, and the brush hog got tied up. So he and his wife are under there trying to cut out the barbed wire under the brush hog, and the hydraulics failed and pins them both to the ground. Neither one of them can move. Neither one of them can breathe. He yells for his young daughter, who has to run next door, get the neighbor. By the time the neighbor comes over with his equipment and lifts the brush hog off of Jay and his wife's non-responsive, no heartbeat. But of course, Jay, having had 2 heart attacks, he is now very familiar with CPR. He does CPR on her, gets her at least to have a heartbeat, a pulse. Emergency services show up. Long story short, Barn, they're doing great. They're both healthy. And Jay is playing some exceptional golf. He made it to the second stage of the Korn Ferry Q School, and he's got an exemption here into Bermuda. Man, I hope he goes out there and just lights the place afire. So to both of you all, go get it this week. We're pulling for you.
And then something else that happened on the way to Bermuda.
Yes.
So another little segment, Ned. I hate it when that happens. But Brian Gay, defending champion, there's also a story, too, that when he was getting ready to get on his flight to go to Bermuda and defend his title, the airline came back and said, the plane's too heavy. You're going to have to take the next flight. Because apparently the plane was loaded with golfers and all their golf equipment and luggage, presumably families and stuff like that. And I'm assuming, of course, this is a smaller kind of an airplane. No, the plane's too heavy. You're going to have to wait. So, Ned, I hate it when that happens.
That's when you turn to your wife and say, see you later.
Yeah.
Beat it.
Take the next plane.
So, Barn, I've heard of this happening on smaller aircrafts like private planes, but he's the defending champion. Somebody else get your butt off the plane. I remember in India one time, my clubs didn't show up, and the next flight wasn't coming in for, it's like 5 hours. But if you wait, you go to the hotel and you hope that they bring your clubs, you may never see them again. So we sat in the airport for like 5 or 6 hours waiting for the next flight in my golf clubs to come. So as a golfer, you never really want to be apart from your clubs. You want to know that they're at least on the plane with you. But hey, this is where caddy and wife, if you're on the plane, you got to take one for the team, especially the defending champion. Hey, the USGA, Barn, has defined the new rules for amateurs. But before we get into that, because it is a pretty interesting conversation, you have anything else? Because I feel like you got something else.
Oh, I've always got something else. I've got a quick shut your mouth, because also something that happened last week, Ned. Bernard Longer, we cannot overlook Bernard Longer, wins the Dominion Energy Charity Classic. Ned, he's 64 years old. He's the oldest champion on the Champions Tour. He's got at least one win since 2007. Ned, do you know how long that's been? Do you know that the Song of the Year in 2007 was Irreplaceable by Beyonce? Did you know that the movie of the year 2007 was, get ready, Pirates of the Caribbean, World's End? Oh, and if you didn't like that movie, the number 2 movie of the year was, are you ready? Try Harry Potter in the Order of the Phoenix. That's how long Bernard Langer has been dominating and playing great on the Champions Tour. Makes me say, shut your mouth.
You shut your mouth when you talk to me like that, Bernard Langer. I mean, come on with it. The man is evergreen, and Barney still swings it the same. He looks the same. Putter can get a little bulky, but he's now just a few wins behind the greatest senior tour, PGA Tour Champions player of all time, Hale Irwin.
That's right.
So we'll see if he can get it done. Yeah, he beat our guy Doug Barron in a playoff. Birdie, the first playoff hole, did Bernard. Okay, so USGA now, Barn, this is really interesting, and I want to make sure I get it right, so I'm going to take out my phone here and just read it. They've simplified what it means to be an amateur. The biggest changes, though, are you can now accept prize money up to $1,000 in what they call scratch competitions. It's increased from $750 to $1,000. The prize rules apply to competitions that require play from teeing area into the hole. Okay, so it has to be a proper competition. It's not a skills challenge or something like that. It's got to be a proper competition. Then you can take your $1,000. They've changed the waiting period if you were a professional and you wanted to come back and become an amateur, get your amateur status back from a minimum of 12 months to 6 months. But the biggest one, Barn, to me, is the elimination, I'm going to read it word for word, elimination of all sponsorship, promotional advertising, and expense-related restrictions. So it's basically matching the collegiate ordinances that you can now take money for your likeness, which is, people have been doing this for a while, just always been kind of swept under the rug. But it really opens up, Barn. Now, if you're an amateur, if you're a collegiate player, you can start taking sponsors. You can have your YouTube channel, you can have Twitter, whatever, and you can start taking money like we've seen for football players, quarterbacks. Now, golfers, I'd like to think that they're going to make that kind of money, but they're not. But they still now are open to the ability to do that. So, for example, Victor Hovland, had he wanted, when he won the USGA US Amateur at Pebble Beach, he could have started taking money for sponsorships and using his likeness as he finished out his career at Oklahoma State. Mm-hmm. But he couldn't because that wasn't allowed. Now it is allowed. Do you like these changes? Did they make you nervous at all?
Well, I think it's probably going to blur the, in this day and age, amateur tournaments at the elite level, that's not really appropriate because it should be more not pro yet. Mm-hmm. Because if me and you, well, I guess I'm still in the Tennessee PGA, so I guess if you were to play in a tournament, again, you've got a real job, real family and stuff, you're a legit amateur. You are actually playing in an amateur tournament.
But I can't because I'm still professional.
Oh, you are still professional.
I'd have to reinstate myself as an amateur.
I thought you had your amateur status back.
It used to be when you went through Q school, you had to declare yourself a professional.
Right.
And so when I declared myself a professional, I always thought, I'm a professional golfer. This is what I do. This is my livelihood. And I just haven't ever changed my philosophy on that. A lot of my friends have, and I get why they would have, but I'm still professional. So for me to play in an official amateur event, I'm not talking about a club event. Yeah, I would have to go back through the reinstatement process.
But that's why, to me, someone that's so it's when they call like the mid-amateur, that to me is the genuine amateur. All these other amateur tournaments that are filled with college players, you might as well call it a semi-pro tournament or mini tour event because every single one of them has aspirations of playing on the PGA Tour and making money playing golf.
And now they can do that as an amateur. One thing that is interesting, I've heard some conversations around how this is going to affect junior golfers, and it's going to open some doors for junior golfers. But as I read deeper into the USGA guidelines, there is a little bit of a disclaimer that says, attention prospective student athletes. This interim guidance applies only to collegiate golfers. If you are still a prospective student athlete, Rule 6 of the amateur status still applies to any actions you take to benefit from your name, image, and likeness. So I was hoping to get a USGA official on. I still might be able to for this episode to really help clarify what that means. The way I read it was, hey, if you're a prospective student athlete, you're not allowed to take the money for your likeness yet. So a little bit of a gray area there. But the 5 big changes, to me, the main one is now amateurs, as you said, are allowed to take money. So they're really kind of semi-pros.
That's right. They're getting there.
So I think that's where we're going to stop today, Barn. What do you think?
That's good.
Again, root for Jay McClune and root for, what was your fella's name?
Brian Morris.
Ryan Morris.
Brian Morris.
Two big stories there. Hope they both play well. And Barney, go ahead, and if you know some amateurs, you coach a lot of really good young amateurs, go ahead and start getting them signed up to make some money, because now they can do it.
That's right.
All right. Hey, thanks, everybody. Barn is at Simplifying Golf on Twitter. I'm at Ned Michaels. Until next week, good sir, peas and carrots. You looking for a vacation? Maybe somewhere you haven't been before, somewhere off the beaten path? Consider Mississippi. You can jump on their website, visitmississippi.org. They had the state fair going on just a couple of weeks ago. They had the PGA Tour in Jackson, Mississippi, the Sanderson Farms Championship. Cruising the Coast, the best automobile show in the country. Deion Sanders, Jackson State. They had 52,000 fans turn up last week at the Jackson State football game. There's so much to do in Mississippi. You can hit the coast. You can gamble a little bit, bet on the sports book, play golf. If you love music, the Grammy Museum, just check it out. Visit Mississippi.org. Normally, at this point, Jonathan Coachman, the coach, would join us from Sportsline, but he has the PFL all day today, Wednesday. Of course, the pod drops on Thursday. So I'm going to take my shot at helping you with some of these picks and props. Again, I don't fancy myself a professional at this, so I'm just going to roll through some of the more popular picks that I am seeing online and give you my thoughts. Okay, Adam Hadwin, outright winner. I've seen this from several different sources and different writers. Okay, listen, this golf course down in Bermuda is pretty short. Adam Hadwin doesn't need a short golf course, although historically the places where he has played well aren't the longest of golf courses. But the thing that bothers me, or at least worries me the most with picking Adam Hadwin this week as an outright winner, is that places that he has won and played well, think about the desert out in California. Very, very calm, docile conditions. And I happened to have a couple of times, a couple of occasions, be on the ground with Adam this past year, calling some of his action. And when it got breezy, I'll use the PGA as an example. When it got breezy, he started pressing a little bit. He was still incorporating swing changes that he had been making with instructor Mark Blackburn. And when he got breezy and he started pressing, his miss was left because they're working on trying to control the club face a little bit better. And I won't bore you with all the details. But he's playing well right now. He's got a bunch of top 10 finishes, and he's coming in playing extremely well, hitting it solid. So obviously he's worked out and he owns some of these swing changes that they've been trying to make. Still makes me a little bit nervous because, as we have seen, this place down in Bermuda gets really, really windy. And also, look at who won the past 2 years here. Brian Gay won at 15 under and Brendan Todd at 24 under. Okay, what do those two players have in common? Neither one of them hit it very far. They both hit it exceptionally straight. They are both magnificent around the greens, but on the greens, they're some of the best in the world. Todd and Gay, when they get rolling with that putter, forget about it. They're in that Brandt Snedeker kind of echelon. Brandt's more consistent, but these guys, when they get rolling with that putter, are fantastic. So for me, Adam Hadwin is not a good outright pick this week just because they don't know exactly what you're going to get out of his driver, and you have to be a world-class putter to win here. Now, don't get me wrong. Adam Hadwin is a world-class player, but I'm talking about if you're going to bet him to win this thing outright, I might lay off. A couple of long shots that I liked. Kiradech Epibonrat to finish inside the top 5. He was injured. He's coming back. He's kind of gone back to his roots, working with his dad as his coach. This is a perfect golf course for Kiradech Epibonrat, the Kung Fu Panda, because this is where he grew up. Short, undulated, kind of dog-leggy, tricky, meandering fairways, a lot of elevation changes and blind shots to greens, and then small, grainy Bermuda greens with slopes all over the joint. Watch his putting stroke. It's just short and kind of, it's not poppy, but it's short to long. And normally on fast bent greens, that's not a great equation. But on these kind of Bermuda tropical greens, I got a feeling Kiradech might pop his head in there. So I like that bet. Kiradech Epibonrat plus top 5 rather is like a plus 1,400 or something like that, depending on which line you look at. And then there's one head-to-head that caught my attention. Mito Pereira, who we mentioned earlier, Barney and I talked about, against Christian Bezuidenhout. Now, I love Christian Bezuidenhout. I think he is one of those players who's just on the next, just needs half a step to become kind of a household PGA Tour name. When you see this guy at a PGA Tour event, you know who it is instead of trying to figure out how to pronounce his name. He is a world-class, top-level bunker player. He's a good striker of his irons. But with his driver, he can get a little bit bulky. And again, on this golf course, it pays to hit it straight. Length is an asset, but it's not an overwhelming category that the player has to have to do well in this event. You look at Mito Pereira. I mean, this guy's one of the hottest players on the entire planet. To me, this is an easy bet. It's Pereira over Bezuidenhout, plus 100 on Pereira's side. It depends on where you look. So anyway, I hope that helps. I don't pretend to be a professional at the gambling side of things. Jonathan Coachman will probably laugh in my face next week. But I'm laying off Adam Hadwin to win it. I am looking at a long shot top 5 out of Kiradech Apabonrat. And I'm looking for Mito Pereira over the South African Christian Bezuidenhout. Maybe you'll make some money off of it. But next, we're definitely going to make some money off of these guys. Dan Nathan and Danny Moses join us on Breaking Even.
Breaking Even is brought to you by Risk Reversal Media. You can find us at riskreversal.com and check out our podcast, On the Tape. Each week, Guy Adami, Danny Moses, and me, Dan Nathan, discuss the biggest market-moving headlines and chat with some of the most influential people on Wall Street, all in an effort to help our listeners make smarter investment decisions. So follow us On the Tape in your preferred podcast store.
Remember that old song that was, I like money, lots and lots of money. Yeah, that's what we're going to do here. Breaking Even, Dan Nathan, Danny Moses, join us, gentlemen.
What's up, Ned? Ned, I got a golf question before we even begin with anything.
All right, hit me.
So there's a lot of rules in sports bother me, but the one that bothers me the most in golf is this Divot Rule. And here's my problem with it. And I've been on a call-in show, PGA Channel, once, and I asked this question. I didn't like the response. If it's a pro event, and there is a divot, you know it's a divot because the courses are immaculate. Why am I playing a different course than you? You tee off at 8 a.m., I tee off at noon. I play out of your divot. I'm playing a different course than you. Now, I know these pros can hit out of divots. It's just not right. You should be able to move the ball, roll it in the fairway, so to speak. I want to get your opinion on the Divot Rule in golf. Ned.
All right, so not only did I play professionally all over the world for 10 years, I also for 2 years hosted Rules Live for the United States Golf Association. All right, so I feel like I'm somewhat qualified to answer this. You should have to play out of my divot because the next day you're going to tee off in front of me and I may play out of your divot. I'm also putting on the greens. You're probably having to putt through my footprints and vice versa. So in terms of the timing of tee times, it's an irrelevant argument. However, what does get me a little bit is a sand-filled divot. In my mind, technically, is ground under repair because we're putting the sand in the divot so that the turf may repair itself. However, on the tour, you don't fill your divots with sand until after the round. People come out and do that. So this is probably the one rule in golf that is the most polarizing. I think you should have to play the ball as it lies, and if you get hosed, you get hosed. But that's the definition of ground under repair is a sand-filled divot in my mind, but it's just kind of bad luck. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know if it did or not.
I mean, it does. I'm still unhappy.
Well, I think that's where the only way I can answer your question is by changing the rule, and then you'd be happy.
All right.
Anyway.
Fair enough.
Hey, I want to talk about two things today. I want to talk about cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin, and then I want to get into this unrealized gains tax that is kind of floating around that to me is a little bit mind-blowing. But let's start on Bitcoin, because earlier this week, or last week, I should say, it reached, 67,000 a Bitcoin. We saw some future ETFs that were launched. I was immediately reminded of Russell Okung, who took half of his NFL salary of $13 million in Bitcoin in December of 2020. At the point, it was $27,000, give or take, per Bitcoin. So it's worked out pretty well for him, but now it's starting to fall a little bit. And Danny, I know you're not the biggest believer in these cryptocurrencies. So I want to start with you. What are you seeing? Is there any reason to be concerned from 67 to now under 60 in the matter of just a couple of days?
I don't know. Every time it's done this, it's kind of recalibrated itself, found footing, and moved higher with a new type of investor base. I think retail on the margin causes a lot of these swings, but the institutional people are still big time behind this. I would defer to Dan Nathan on this crypto thing. He has the diamond hands, not me.
Dan, before you get started, I do want to remind you that at some point you and Tom Lee were having a conversation and you were asked second half trade for this year. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ethereum was your pick. You still believe that?
Yeah, I do. And listen, Ethereum is about 4,000. It got as low as about 1,700 on a few occasions over the course of the spring and the summer. And each instance I was there buying. Danny, on Friday, you kind of shortchanged me. You said, Dan, I got to give you credit when it was breaking 3,000 Ethereum. You said you were buying.
Buying more.
I know. 2,000 was, listen, here's the thing for me. What I find interesting, Ned, is that Bitcoin, and I've said this to you, whether on the podcast or not, I think it has a bit of a branding problem. It's not a cryptocurrency. It's a crypto asset. It's a store of value. You think it's a better inflation hedge than, let's say, shiny metal gold, which needs to be stored, it needs to be mined, and there's a whole host of things that go. But that also creates some of that store of value, if you think about it. So a lot of people would say, well, a digital store of value is a bit more portable, and there is all the cryptography that has to go into it, the mining and everything like that. So there's a similar sort of function, a proof of work that actually demonstrates that value. I find all of that intellectually very curious. We are still in the first pitch of the first inning of this. I know that Satoshi wrote that white paper back in 2009 and became popular in 2010, that sort of thing. And you could have bought all the Bitcoins you wanted, Ed, for like $1. You know what I mean? You'd be literally a trillionaire. So I find Bitcoin really interesting. I would kind of put it in the store of value crypto asset bucket. And one of the reasons why Ethereum, and why I said that to Tom Lee of Fundstrat, and he is I think he's a Bitcoin maximalist. That means that he's all in on the Bitcoin and doesn't really focus so much on a lot of the other altcoins. I look in my universe in finance and in tech, and I see the smartest people around me focused on building protocols, you know what I mean, and applications for a decentralized web that is built on smart contracts or the platform of Ethereum or Solana or some others. And that's why I find that more interesting. It's easily relatable to me as a stock market investor, if that makes sense.
It does.
I would add, though, and I think Dan would agree, if Bitcoin went to 32,000 right now or 22,000, I don't think it would shock anybody. I mean, it would be shocking, but it wouldn't shock the people. And the people that are long-term that Dan just mentioned that believe in this thing, it would be a buying opportunity. But again, I think the simplest way to look at it is the argument that I hear the most from bulls is, hey, if I just think of crypto as a $2.5 trillion, or sometimes it's $2 trillion, sometimes it's $3 trillion asset class, I can make the argument that it should exist, and these are the applications for it in the future. So I can argue on both sides. I do think, though, Ned, and again, this is not what you asked, but between the Bitcoin and all that stuff, there are a lot of fraudulent, quote, coins out there.
So do you think institutions are buying Bitcoin or Ethereum, but let's just focus on Bitcoin here, and really not being public about it? Because these big swings, you can attribute it to retail, but you would think more than anything, these institutions have the biggest influence.
That's a great question, Ned, because I think a lot of institutions' hands have been forced to say that they're, quote, involved in it in some case. So they are going to be public about it. Whether they're announcing a business venture with a credit card company or they're announcing something, I think they want their shareholders to know that we get it, we see it. Some are deeper than others. I think there are quiet people obviously doing it, and maybe they're announcing they're going to build some type of strategy. Those are the people that are probably more thoughtful, that are going to announce some type of infrastructure product with the Bitcoin as it relates to their product or whatever it may be. But I think a lot of people are doing it to say that they're in it so they don't get crushed by the shareholders asking them why not.
Yeah, and I would also say, Ned, that you've heard this expression for maybe 150 years, the whole notion of like, okay, I can either go and mine the thing that might have value, or I could be selling the picks and the shovels. That goes back to the kind of gold rush in the mid 1800s, that sort of thing. And I think there's a lot of really smart institutions that think that the banking and regulation and a lot of things around actually holding Bitcoin or owning it or custodying it, that sort of thing, might be really murky at the moment. But in the meantime, I can kind of get my toe in the water, my foot in the door by selling the picks and shovels and think about it from a technology standpoint. And I think that is something that the private tech community is really focused on, that seeing this in a way that they saw the internet and the potential disruption This is going back to the 90s, you know what I mean, of all these different industries. And so one of the first buzzwords that's coming out of this kind of second phase of this kind of crypto renaissance, if you will, in the last 5 years is this whole idea of DeFi, decentralized finance. That's a term that I think your listeners are going to hear more and more, and it's going to be a pillar of the bull case for smart contracts and some of these altcoins away from Bitcoin.
All right, so if I have $100, $1,000, whatever it is, am I buying into crypto? And if I am, what am I buying?
Yeah, so I would say this, and Ned, I have an 18-year-old daughter, and she has this little side business where she buys clothes on eBay and sells them on Depop, and then the proceeds go into a PayPal account. And right below her balance, it says, buy crypto, ? And they only give you the option to buy Bitcoin and Ethereum, okay? And I think PayPal will kind of get much bigger. They'll have more coins going forward. And what I said to my daughter, who's 18 years old, okay, and she's not particularly, I don't know, she's not out and about spending a lot of money. Again, she basically wears used clothes and everything like that. So good on her. I said to her, you have an asymmetric opportunity here. And I would say this to almost any investor. Microsoft has a $2.3 trillion market cap. It's one of the largest stocks in the entire world. The stock obviously could go to zero. It's not very likely. The stock could go down 20, 30% in any period of time. It did so back in March of 2020, okay? But it's not likely to go to zero. Is it going to be a $10 trillion market cap company at some point? Maybe not in our lifetimes or something like that. When you think of the market cap of Ethereum and Bitcoin combined, okay, they're about $1.5 trillion. It's asymmetric. They could easily go to zero. They could go to zero in 2 years based on a whole host of things that happens, a regulatory and this and that, whatever. Or they could go to 10 or 12 trillion dollars, which is the market cap globally of gold. And people really only hold gold as an inflation hedge. So when I think about that, I see that as asymmetric, if you will. And that's why I find this opportunity really interesting. That being said, some really smart people, and Danny is one of them, who tends to find kind of some issues why this thing might not be what everyone hopes it to be. They make smart arguments why this thing could be regulated into oblivion. I just think about some of the arguments that were made about the internet 25 years ago, and they seem very similar to what people are trying to pick at in crypto right now.
I would counter one thing. Let me just say, I would pose this to Dan and to you, Ned. Have you ever seen a gold necklace? You ever seen a gold bracelet before?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a Bitcoin necklace?
Yeah, but I've seen JPEGs.
All right.
Hold on. I've seen Bored Apes that are trading for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've seen Pudgy Penguins that are trading for hundreds. No, but what I'm saying is, like, that's it. And Ned, I want to make one point because Danny's trying to be a little snarky here. This is what we do on Breaking Even with Ned Michaels here. And we love it, man. We love it. We get to test our verbal muscles here a little bit on Breaking Even. I would say this is that gold necklace. You actually are making my point, Danny, is that wearing a gaudy gold Bulgari necklace for 200 grand or something is for status and identity. And that's the same reason why these people who made a lot of money in crypto are buying some of these NFTs and these JPEGs, because to them, it is digital status and identity. And I think that us boomers can kind of hate on this stuff as much as we want. There's something different going on out there, and people are seeing assets in a different manner. And I think you have to kind of open your mind a little bit to some of this stuff.
Fine.
You know what I find amazing is that you all just spoke for about 4 minutes and nobody answered the question. Are you buying?
Oh, I do.
And what are you buying?
So what I do is I buy on pullbacks, and this was the advice that I gave to my daughter, is that you have a long-term time horizon. And I think that you think about this as, let's say, a single-digit position in your investable assets. For her, she doesn't own stocks individually. It's 100%. But again, for her to spend a few grand totally, or building up and buying a couple $100 of both of these a month with her proceeds of her little business, that makes sense to me. And I would say that to any young investor who's thinking about trying to grow wealth over a long period of time. If you look at how crypto has performed over the last 10 years versus other risk assets, to have 5% of your investable capital in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then maybe a couple percent in some altcoins that make sense to you because they're building some sort of protocol that you think is going to massively disintermediate some existing business, that makes sense to me. Oh, wow. Ned's eyes just kind of blew up right there.
I mean, I was thinking yes or no, and I got disseminate. So I'm going to say yes is your answer. And Bitcoin, Ethereum is kind of a coin flip for you.
I think you do both because I think they both exist for different purposes. And I think in this new kind of Web3 decentralized world, I think they're both going to have massive utility. So to me, I like them both. And I think you buy them on pullback. And I'll make one other point. So Ned, when you just talked about the fact that Bitcoin came in from a new high of 67,000 just last week, and I think as we're taping right now, it's 59,000. The volatility that we see, and that's up from 29,000 about a month and a half ago. A lot of Bitcoin people or crypto evangelists will tell you that volatility is a feature of crypto. It's not a bug, meaning like that's what you should be here for because it gives you the opportunities as the fundamentals change, as the story improves, as some of the headwinds build, as it may be about regulatory things here and abroad. It gives you that opportunity if you do have a long-term vision to get in and keep averaging in.
Danny Moses, what say you?
The answer is you should have something in this thing. Listen, if I'm going to sit here and tell you that you should have some small amount of gold in your portfolio, then I'd be a hypocrite to say you shouldn't have some small amount of crypto in your portfolio. So I can see the argument on both. And so the answer is probably a small amount is worth it because once you put some dollar amount into something, it makes you do work on it regardless. And I think it's worthwhile for everyone to kind of look into this and do the research and see what it offers. There will be applications for this. It's really the blockchain application. And Dan's argument on Ethereum to me is much more utility than Bitcoin. And it's proven that way. So I think Ethereum over Bitcoin, but that's just my personal take, but just leave it at that. I'm still caught up on the divots, but go ahead, Ned. Yeah.
Either way, you're holding your nose to dip your toe into these markets. If I had a football that had been a touchdown thrown by Tom Brady, and it happened to be a momentous occasion, it's, I believe, 600th touchdown for Tom Brady, and the ball was given to a fan. And apparently the exchange now has been made. Tom Brady has the ball back and paid the fan with a Bitcoin. I think the fan got ripped because that ball, first of all, the only person who really wants that ball long-term is Tom Brady. And you know Tom Brady's got a lot of dough, so you just kind of hold it and you just use it as leverage until finally it might be worth $500,000 or you put it on auction. But one Bitcoin, when Tom Brady gave him to him, was worth $67,000 and now it's worth $57,000. Again, this is all speculation. That's what I've read in the news that happened in exchange for this touchdown football, but I don't think it was a good deal. I think the guy got ripped.
So, Ned, Brady was talking about this with Eli and Peyton on the Monday night broadcast. You know that little thing he does?
Yes.
Do you worry about, as a commentator, a sideline commentator with sports, are you guys going to like find yourself off the field or off the course and then you're just going to be on like a Zoom just talking about it pretty soon and just rapping in a very casual manner? I thought that was really interesting, but he was laying out to Eli and Peyton. He said the guy was pretty cool. He said his receiver just didn't know what he was doing, gave him the ball. And he's like, listen, we're going to give him a lot of stuff here. And I thought Peyton had a great line. Peyton said, man, that guy should have held out. He said he had max leverage at that point. He said he would have been sitting in the Tom Brady box for like lifetime if he had done that thing straight. And Brady goes, well, I gave him a Bitcoin.
Great. I don't have an autographed Bitcoin. Now, a Tom Brady NFT?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, maybe there's some value there. Yeah, I think he left a lot on the table, personally. To answer your question about commentary, yeah, I do think that the remote is going to be the way of the future. And I have long said that a lot of different broadcasts are going to be like what we're watching with the Mannings. Two people sitting around in their living rooms talking, because that's when you go and you do your first work as a commentary, whether as a former player or you're coming out of, say, Syracuse in their broadcasting journalism school, which is amazing. One of the things they always tell you is make it feel like you're sitting in the living room just talking with your buddies. And that now is literally what we're watching. So I've long believed that to be the case. I think that COVID just put everything fast forward 5 years. And so we're seeing a lot of these things done digitally and remotely, which is great, because that means we can watch so much more. We can have so much more content and sports in our lives. But it also means that you're going to lose a little bit of the depth of coverage, because when you are at an event and you are on the course or you are on the field and you can talk to the players and you can go to dinner with your team, that's where the really good information comes.
Well, Ned, the stock market figured that out a long time ago, when basically there used to be people on the floor, and now there's about 1% of the people that were there were on the floor. So yeah, Monday morning quarterback's always the best way to go, certainly from the stock market.
Yeah, but you know what's funny, Danny, you say that, and Guy and I just interviewed Stacey Cunningham for On the Tape. It's going to drop a day or two after you're breaking even, and she is the president of the New York Stock Exchange. And we actually talked a lot about that whole human aspect. So you've seen the New York Stock Exchange for years, the pictures of it, and the hundreds of generally guys running around and executing trades and going to booths where the stocks are traded. There is something to be said for that. So your point about just kind of being on the ground, on a course, talking to different people, talking to coaches, talking to other commentators, that sort of thing, you gain a level of insight that is just really hard to do electronically, that sort of thing.
One question here about this unrealized gain thing. We don't have much time, so this is literally going to be just give me your top of mind thoughts here on taxation of unrealized gains, meaning that I bought anything, in this case we'll say a stock, and it has gone up $10, and I am yet to sell it, but it's tax time, and I have to pay taxes on gains that I haven't even taken in any format. And this is across the board, and a lot of speculation. But Danny, what are we doing?
You know, there's certain things on paper that may look good, and then in reality, that this doesn't even look good on paper. It's so against everything that should be capitalism and innovation and everything. And I'll ask this, I'll flip it on them. So if I buy a stock and it goes down, can I take an unrealized loss against my gains? Of course, that's not even...
You'd have to be able to.
Well, I would think you'd have to be able to. Let me just say, if something like this asinine ever got passed, which I don't think it has any chance to, but if it did, there'd be loopholes immediately created. There'd be stuff bought on swap. There'd be trust accounts set up to do it. That's just not something that makes sense. It goes against the whole idea of buying and holding and believing in something in the future. Should billionaires in general take a step back? Should billionaires pay their fair share of taxes? Yes. Do billionaires and very wealthy people have the best tax lawyers, the best people, the best way to keep their wealth and grow it over time? Yes. And should there be loopholes? No. They probably should pay more. But what's fair? And this is something that I just think is outrageous and stupid. So I'll let Dan answer the question also.
No, you know what, Ned? It goes back to the people that would be most affected is like the highest dollar amounts. They'll figure out how to get around it. I mean, it's just that simple to Danny's point. I mean, you could hedge out gains and that sort of thing and show losses. And so at the end of the day, it's a bunch of window dressing. It's optics. And it's a pretty lousy plan because it ultimately, it will cause investors who should have a much long-term view about growing wealth to take a short-term view based on taxes. And it's the exact wrong thing that our regulators and our lawmakers should be thinking about, especially these lawmakers who are busy trading however they want, whenever they want, not subject to some of the same rules that others who have like potentially inside information have.
It strikes me as political posturing. You're taking this polarizing point of view that everybody realizes that this is insane. How are you going to implement it? Imagine what it's going to do to family businesses that have been passed down over generations. It's absolutely insane, but at the same time, it's so insane that it's scary and it kind of moves the other pole a little bit closer to where they are going to want to end up to be. So again, just strikes me as a slap to the face, cold water in the face kind of political posturing. And by the way, anytime I hear it looks good on paper, the only thing I can think of is Christmas Vacation when it's the Jelly of the Month Club. Remember? and Cousin Eddie brings in the boss and he said, well, it looks good on paper until you see what it does to families.
No, same with my Ryder Cup picks. They looked great on paper when I was doing it. So, nah, but thanks. Yeah.
Hey, I told you do not bet on the Europeans.
I know, man.
All right, Dan Nathan, Danny Moses, that's all the time we have. Thank you for being with us on Breaking Even. Hopefully I've made some money for everybody out there. Something we're going to do a little bit different on Breaking Even moving forward. The last segment is just going to be nuggets from Ned, things that you should know, maybe topics of conversation that you can use throughout the weekend. So starting with the world of golf, the United States Golf Association has redefined the rules of amateur status. The highlight point is that amateurs may now take on sponsorships. They now may make money for their likeness. So it's matching the NCAA guidelines and rules. Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau, their 12-hole match from Vegas is coming up the day after Thanksgiving. Hey, make sure you tune into the PGA Tour event this week because there's going to be a lot of names that you're not familiar with, but terrific storylines. I want you to go Google Jay McClune. All right, Jay McClune. That's who I want you to keep an eye out for as you watch PGA Tour event this week. Incredible, incredible story. Tom Brady, he traded a Bitcoin for his 600th touchdown ball that was given to a fan. If I was the fan, I would have held out way more valuable than just a Bitcoin. Maybe there's more to the story than we possibly know. And it's my birthday tomorrow, October 29th. So wish me a happy birthday. Hope it's a great day. Maybe spent on the golf course. Jump on my Twitter. I'm at Ned Michaels. Just throw me a happy birthday. I'll get back to you. You can always hit me up in the DM with any questions or thoughts on how we can make breaking even better. Until next week, this is Ned Michaels saying so long.